what, Dad?" Ricky said. "Was he not around or not interested enough to get involved?" I asked. "The first, I come from a large family tree of irresponsible men," he said. "When we go back to work next week, Buck won't be there, but what's going to happen between you two the next time he's assigned to our boat?" I asked. "I guess I'll try to get along with him and focus on my job," Ricky said. "But you've seen how Buck operates. He doesn't leave anyone alone to only do their job. He somehow finds a way to insert himself into every conversation and situation. It's a sickness with him. That's how egotistical and narcissistic people are," I said. "Live and let live. I'll leave him alone and go about my business if he will," Ricky said. "But the next time he makes fun of me or tries to bully me around, I'll knock his teeth out. I don't care if they fire me. If you do that, you'll not only get fired, you will probably get arrested for assault." "No, there's got to be a better way," I said. "Yeah? How?" he asked. I guess I was asking for that question without thinking about how to answer it. If the answer were so easy, there would be no bullying. I was no psychologist who had studied behavior, so I couldn't give him any educated advice. I could only tell him what I would do. Well, to start with, wear a little thicker skin when it comes to his name calling. He's trying to diminish you in other people's eyes, to make himself look more important, or changing the subject to hide or cover up something. He might even be doing it to not show his own ignorance, which is immense if you listen to what he says. He couldn't engineer a bread box, much less build one. But he sure knows how to convince you he could, or talk you out of needing one in the first place to end the discussion. You said he didn't start arguing with you until you came into the galley. That's because he wanted and needed an audience to boost his ego and protect him. The crew probably thought he was being smart, funny, clever, or whatever, and their reaction was disarming to you, and you didn't quite know what to do. When they laugh or encourage him, they are giving him their approval. Now it's you against the whole room. If they are silent and seem to be ignoring what is being said or going on, he still wins, because he's throwing his authority around and you think might equals right to them, and their silence is a sign of acceptance and approval. Even if you are inclined to knock his teeth out, you won't, because the group dynamic is protecting him from harm, and you'll end up looking like the bully and thug and he the wronged victim, I said. "How can I fight all that? Looks to me like I lose either way," he said. "You start by being the adult in the room. You take the high road. When he starts calling you names, you tell him to stop it, because you and everyone else knows he is trying to change the subject. Then you try to put him on the spot, rattle him, and work on bringing him and others back to the real topic. When he lies, you stand up and tell him the truth to his face, so others can hear it. When he makes decisions you don't agree with, stand up for what you believe in and what is right. When he picks on someone in your presence, you tell him to lay off and stand by that person. But we are all on the same boat, the same crew, won't that look like insubordination?" Ricky asked. "Maybe, but if you don't stand up for what you think is right or what you believe in, then you end up being his accomplice. Choose who you want to be and how you want to be remembered, not be part of the crew that sank the boat," I said. "Okay, but what if he decides to get physical with me?" he asked. "I doubt that will happen. That's not his true motive. Most bullies are bluffers. They want to sound tough, like to talk about being strong. They want to push your buttons, to drive you to one step within fighting, but they are usually cowards when it comes to physical fights. They'd rather egg on their followers to do their dirty work. But if he does get physical, let him start it, not you, then he is the one arrested for assault," I said. Ricky sat there looking a little overwhelmed and confused. Maybe I had laid out too many choices for him. The truth is, back then people were more likely to decide matters with their fists first, and the police and lawyers seldom got involved. Still, I was trying to discourage him from that action, despite what I'm about to say. I looked him square in the eye and said, "Or maybe you knock his teeth out defending yourself and get fired for it." We sat there looking at each other, trying to keep straight faces, but we couldn't. We burst out laughing and poked each other on the arms and shoulders like a couple of kids. I swear it was a priceless moment in our lives. It was like we decoded how each other thought. When we got back to work after Christmas, Buck was gone, replaced by a new permanent crew pilot named Ted, whose last name I can't remember because he only lasted for our January duty and was gone by March when our next trip started. Naturally, the company decided not to do us any favors and assigned Buck to our boat as the vacancy pilot. Our first day out, Ricky and Buck must have steered clear of one another because I saw them both separately at mealtimes, and neither gave a hint that he knew the other existed. But the second day, they both showed up at the same time, looking for a mid-afternoon snack. They exchanged dirty looks, but neither said a word. Later that night, I couldn't sleep, so I went down to the galley about 1 a.m. Cap was sitting at the dinner table drinking a cup of coffee. I poured myself a cup, sat down across from him and lit one of his Pall Mall cigarettes. "How's it going, Roy?" I said. "It's going, you? I need to talk to you about Buck." I then proceeded to tell him about Buck and Ricky Dean's run-in. "Yeah, I heard about it. Everybody on board knows Buck is an ass. They just silently suffer through his infrequent assignments with us for the sake of harmony." "I wouldn't worry about it, Rita," he said. "But Ricky Dean is not like everyone else on board. He's awfully young. I think younger than he'd like us to believe. And he's new to the working world and river life. Inexperienced at dealing with a world-class bully and narcissist like Buck. He's a good kid. Smart, responsible, and a hard worker. We need people like him on our full-time crew. But if the bullies of the world, like Buck, don't get called out for their bad behavior, we will never keep talented guys like Ricky Dean on our boat," I said. "Buck will only be with us till end of month, but okay, I'll talk to him and tell him to lay off," Cap said. "That will only encourage him. He'll think Ricky reported him and he'll relentlessly attack him." "No, you've got to do something more permanent," I said. "Such as?" "I'm not sure. Right now, they are on the same watch rotation. How about separating them for the rest of the month?" "Will do," Cap said. "I know Buck's a vacancy pilot who fills in as needed on all the company's towboats, and that he's proud of that status, but can you deny him duty on our boat, or at least let him know he's not welcome here?" I asked. "Probably not, but I'll try. FYI, he's not welcomed on most of the fleet's boats. Everybody knows that, which is why they just try to ignore him," Cap said. Then he leaned to one side and pulled a thin silver flask out of his back pocket and poured a shot of something clear into his coffee. I looked around the galley and through the windows to see if anyone on deck was around to see this. "You need to be careful doing that around the rest of the crew, especially Buck," I said. "He'd like nothing better than to report you, then try to get promoted to captain and take command of your boat. You know they'd pull your license if you were caught drinking on duty." "You gonna tell them?" he asked. "Of course not, but I worry something bad will happen, and the Stars and Stripes will lose the best damned captain on the Mississippi. I don't drink on duty. Just a shot or two to help me sleep when I'm off watch." "Like it or not, Roy, you're always on duty." "Yeah, I know," he said. "I never judged Roy for his drinking because I never saw it impair his judgment or ability on the job. Nor did I try to find out what his reasons for doing it were, but they must have been big ones because he knew drinking could end his riverboat career. Roy was always laid back, so I like to think he was just a functioning drunk. If he had reasons for his drinking, he kept them to himself. We all have our secrets. Things we never talk about. Things we regret, wish we had or hadn't done, feel guilty about. Secrets we take to our graves." I stopped talking for a while. But the red light on that camera stayed on, waiting for me to continue. Finally I said, "Can we take a break and turn that camera off? I'm feeling a little tired and need to think about a few things." "Of course, Rita. Let me know when you're ready," the cameraman said. All this reminiscing got me feeling a little melancholy. Thinking about Roy's lonely life and secrets, and my own. Like everyone, I had my own cross to bear, baggage I had stuffed deep in the trunk of my brain. You know, Rita, these are great recollections, very descriptive and detailed accounts of time passed in your life. If there are any secrets or untold parts of your life you want to be shared with your friends, family, or someone special after you're gone, this video might be a good way to do it. I can include or leave out those parts as you direct me. That cameraman must have been reading my mind. I didn't know where he was coming from or if he was trying to confuse me. But if he thought I was going to suddenly start spilling my guts out to his movie camera, he was flat out wrong. In fact, he was starting to bug me almost as much as that nosy couple living with me. If you're through trying to coax me or direct me or whatever you movie people are trained to do, I'd like to finish telling my story without interruption. Because I'm supposed to meet Mary for dinner later tonight, I said. But, Rita, Mary is what? Nothing, the cameraman said. As far as I know, Ricky Dean did his best to stay clear of Buck after the captain put them on different watches. But sometimes on towboats things happen and watches overlap or get extended. That's just life on the river. Nobody has or wants an 8 to 5 kinda job and they don't get one. It's what makes that life different in them special people. So it happened one morning when Ricky was getting ready to go on the captain's watch, and Buck was coming off an 11-hour shift. Buck came in with a couple of deckhands, Cliff and Sonny, and all four of them ended up in my galley within minutes of one another. "Well, look at who decided to join our Navy, it's Captain Cubby," Buck said. Ricky ignored him, poured himself a glass of milk, and sat at the opposite end of the dinner table. Sonny and Cliff sank down into recliners near the end of the table where Buck had taken the captain's chair. "What's the matter, Cubby? Why are you sitting so far away? You think we smell bad? Need a shower?" Buck said. I kept my eye on Ricky, waiting for him to make a fist and go after Buck, praying he wouldn't. All the things I told Ricky at Christmas about how he could handle this situation were running through my mind. And while I worried about what he might do, I admired his courage because I believed he wasn't afraid of Buck or of getting fired if he decided to stand up to him. Still, I thought I might need to say or do something if things started to go bad between them. So I turned my thoughts to that, and what the consequences to Ricky and me might be. I remembered when I got laid off by A&P, how scared I was of being unemployed and broke. But when I felt at my lowest point, this river cook job came my way and things turned out okay. Better than okay, in fact. And I realize how hampered and unhappy I'd been working at A&P for all those years. I didn't know it until I came here. That made what I was going to do seem easier. If Ricky or I got fired, it might not be the worst thing that could happen to either of us. It might turn out for the best. I wanted the words I told Ricky Dean at Christmas to carry some weight, not just sound like a slogan about the right thing to do. So, I picked up a pot of coffee and a mug, and walked over to the table where Buck was sitting and intentionally stood really close to him, violating his personal space. Only little boys, knowing they are trying to be bullies, act the way Buck did. Little boys who think they won't get smacked down or stopped short. I figured if Buck was going to act like a bratty little schoolboy, that's how I was going to treat him. I laid my hand on his shoulder lightly, like a schoolteacher would do to a mouthy class clown to quiet him down and stop his classroom disruption. Then reached around him with the coffee pot and slowly poured him a cup. "Buck, I thought we had the conversation about my galley rules last time you disagreed with someone in here. When you're in the pilot house, you get to be in charge of the boat, but down here in my galley, I'm in charge full time, and you and the rest of the boys are all equal in my eyes. So, Let me remind you what my rules are. We don't argue or fight with one another here, not about politics, work, religion, or the weather. We are a family having a meal together in peace. And if you or anyone else can't follow my rules, then they might have to eat alone in their quarters. If that isn't enough to help you remember the rules, then I might just forget to put my maple cinnamon rolls out for the midnight watch. That woke up Cliff and Sunny, and for a change, they decided to chime in on the conversation. Hey, Buck, if you're not careful she'll send you to the Texas deck without your 3 a.m. snack, Cliff said. Yeah, Buck, you don't want no cinnamon roll mutiny on your hands, do you? Sunny added. I'm second in charge on this boat, so I'm not too worried about a mutiny over some rules made up by a bull roaster like Rita, Buck said. All three of them had a good laugh at my expense. Then it was my turn, and I decided to put them to the test. How about we go ask Cap about who has authority over the galley? If he sees eye to eye with you boys, well, there are always other towboats on the river who might be willing to welcome me aboard, I said. That got Cliff and Sunny's full attention. By God, Buck, stop laughing and fooling around. This is serious talk she's doing. You're only a part-timer on this boat. Swallow your oversized ego and tell her you'll follow her rules before me and the rest of the boys decide to convince you otherwise, Cliff said. Yeah, all you've got to lose is cinnamon rolls every few months. If we lose Aunt Rita to another boat, the rest of us will be paying for your stubbornness, 28 by 4 plus square meals for every duty trip going forward. And we ain't gonna let her get traded for some scout cook, just so you can feel special about yourself, Sunny said. While I appreciated Cliff and Sunny's help and support, I hated to think the only time they were willing to stand up for the right thing to do was when their stomachs were on the line. That's the way some people are though. It takes their jobs, wallets, stomachs, or way of life to be threatened before they'll do what's right. I never knew if Ricky and Buck had words or fisticuffs outside of my galley after that. But Buck still had all his teeth the night he drove the Stars and Stripes headlong into that sandbar. It was a scary night. The force of the sudden stop threw me out of my bunk and onto the cabin floor. When I stumbled down the companionway stairs and onto the outer deck, the fog was so thick I could barely see my hand in front of my eyes. It engulfed our push boat, seeming to surround my senses and swallow me like quicksand. The boat's floodlights helplessly searched for a way out. Excuse me, Rita, does it matter that you started this videotape with the star hitting the sandbar in a whiteout snowstorm, and now it's hitting the sandbar in a fog? Which was it? The cameraman asked. Snowstorm. I never said snowstorm. How could it have been during a snowstorm? It was springtime, the end of March. There's no snowing on the mid-Mississippi that time of year. Do you want me to run the tape back to check? He said. I want you to stop telling me what to do, so there's still time today for me to visit Mary's grave. I'm just trying to help you get it right. Maybe you are getting tired. Your memory seems to be vague on some of the details, and your thoughts are wandering a little, he said. There is nothing vague about my memory. You're a very frustrating man to work with, do you know that? And if you think my thoughts are wandering, it's because you keep stopping to tell me that they are, instead of letting me tell my story, I said. Now turn that camera back on and just listen. I was standing at the nose of the towboat, looking at the white wall of fog, when Sunny came running through it. Captain, we might have a man overboard on the port side. I'm not sure who. Can you bullhorn all hands to the main deck for a head count? He said. Oh my God, who was up there with you? I asked. Cliff and Ricky, Sunny said. After what felt like an eternity, Cliff broke through the fog, bare-chested and holding his wadded-up t-shirt to the side of his head. You okay down there? I heard Cap's voice from the pilot house over the bullhorn. Yeah, okay, just hit my head on the deck when we ran aground, Cliff said. Any sign of Ricky Dean? Cap asked. No, Cliff answered. Things got crazy after that. I was so worried about Ricky I couldn't pay attention to what was being said or what was going on around me. I just remember that Cap ordered all hands to abandon ship, and I was standing on the starboard side of the forward barge getting ready to jump into the river. "Don't worry, Rita, the water is not deep here, chest high at the most. It's a few hundred feet to the shore, but you will be okay, you'll be waiting on a sandy bottom," Ricky said. I don't know how long he had been missing, I must have been in a daze. But there he was, standing next to me, reassuring me. "Oh Ricky, thank God you're safe," I said, as I threw my arms around him and held him tight. "We need to hurry, Rita, Cap is on the radio, calling the Coast Guard for help, and blasting out the danger signal on the boat's whistle, warning any boats in the area of our wreck. I think he's worried about another towboat ramming into us in the fog," he said. Then he helped lower me into the water. Halfway to the shore, I stepped into a drop-off, and our arms broke apart, leaving the undertow to pull me down and out toward the channel. When I popped back up, I heard Ricky calling my name. I could barely see him through the fog. "Rita, Rita," he shouted as he danced around thrashing his arms underwater, trying to find me. "Here, I'm behind you," I cried out. He spun around and lunged in my direction. As I drifted away, I felt his outstretched hand grab mine. For a few feet, the current carried us freely towards the river's middle, until our feet touched the bottom edge of the sandbar, and we were able to regain our footing. Safely on shore, we found the rest of our crew building a bonfire from driftwood and downed tree limbs on the edge of a newly plowed field. Everyone was wet and cold, and we sat huddled together in silence, shivering, and leaning in close to the fire for warmth. Captain Roy's voice eerily echoed over the bullhorn through the fog, telling us the towboat company was sending 2 tugboats after dawn to help pull the stars and stripes off the sandbar, and a Coast Guard rescue boat was on its way to pick up the crew when the fog lifted. About an hour before dawn, all the excitement of the towboat collision with the sandbar had calmed down. We were all exhausted from the ordeal. Some of the crew members had even dozed off to sleep as we sat in a circle around the bonfire, waiting for the rescue boat to find us. Ricky and I were sitting beside the fire, facing in opposite directions with our backs against one another for support. "Have you ever wondered what living and working full-time on land would be like?" he asked. "No, I don't have to wonder, I know what it's like. Until 7 years ago, when I got laid off by A&P, it was the only life I knew." "Why are you asking? You haven't worked on the river long enough to have forgotten what it's like, have you?" I said. "No, I guess not. Maybe I'm feeling a little nostalgic. Because I've been thinking about whether I should go back to school," he said. "Well, you are sure smart enough. Would you move home to Pittsburgh to do that?" I asked. "No, I wouldn't be welcomed back. That bridge is burned," he said. "Then what would you do? Work nights and go to school days?" "I don't know, I haven't thought everything through yet. I know I don't want to live in a shelter and work as a day laborer like I was doing last Christmas though. Don't get me wrong, working on the river is not a bad life. And if I could somehow do it and go to school on my off months it might work out. But that's not how schools operate," Ricky said. "What about correspondence classes? I've seen ads for those kinds of colleges in magazines, on matchbooks, and the sides of city buses," I said. He didn't answer right away, so I figured he was considering it. "That's not the level of school I'm talking about, at least not right now," he said, as he squared around to face me. "Then what? Trade school?" He nodded no. "High school, did you drop out of high school?" "Yeah, what of it, lots of kids do it," he said. "It's no big deal." "So you dropped out of school last year?" "You can catch up," I said. "But I dropped out mid-year before," he said. "Okay, 2 years behind then." "Rita, there's something else I've been thinking about and haven't had the nerve to ask you, but after what happened tonight, In those few moments we were adrift in the river, clinging to each other for life. I don't feel as afraid to ask. So here goes. If I were to go back to school full-time, what would you say if I asked you to let me live at your place? We've hit it off as friends, and I hope you know I could be trusted and respectful of your property, and I'd follow any rules you lay down. I could go to school during the daytime and work nights and weekends. And I'd pay you rent and look after the place the months you'd be on the river. I know it's a lot to ask, but it might work out okay for both of us. I could go to school, and you'd have a full-time caretaker and handyman watching over your place.